Political panel, CNN political analyst Maria Cardona. She is also a Democratic strategist. Good to see you, Maria. And Republican strategist Rena Shaw. Good to see you, Rena. All right. So, Maria, let me start with you. Do you see a debate won as likely, and who has more to gain from a debate?
Oh, I think President Biden has a ton to gain from a debate. Like he said in his video, he won decisively the two debates that he had against Donald Trump in 2020. And I think this time around, he will have even more of an advantage because going into this election, there's going to be a clear contrast, especially when both men are on the stage, about who has the positive vision of continuing to bring this economy and grow it for everyone with the massive accomplishments that Joe Biden has already had under his belt and continuing to solve for the issues that we know are critical and that American families are still struggling for, versus a MAGA extremist agenda that is focused on chaos, on confusion, on violence, on retribution, on vengeance. We all know Donald Trump is only in this to stay out of jail, and he has focused his agenda for the next 4 years on mass deportations of the 12 million undocumented immigrants. We already saw news about what's going on in Ukraine. Donald Trump would essentially hand Ukraine to Putin on a silver platter. That is not something that we need for our democracy. And speaking of democracy, he is someone who does not believe in our Constitution, who already tried to essentially have a coup here in the United States. And so our democracy is on the line as well. So that huge contrast, I think, will be a tremendous advantage for President Biden going into the fall elections.
Rena, what do you think? I mean, we know that Trump did not want to debate or chose not to debate his GOP challengers in the primary. But do you think that he steps up to the plate and debates? And is that a potentially good thing for him? Or are there pitfalls for Trump?
I think the Trump team saw how it would not help Trump to back out from debating Biden. You know, it certainly helped him in the fall in backing out from debating his GOP opponents. I mean, that was a very different thing. Not being in the room meant he never had to answer questions on their face. And also, it also kind of put him with the GOP electorate in a stronger footing, kind of giving people that nostalgia again of when Trump appeared strong, sounded strong, and it felt like things like the economy were also strong. So it was a different set of circumstances in the fall. Now, when he's going up against Biden, there is no doubt we're going to hear aspirational, positive talk from Biden, and we're going to hear negative doom and gloom from Trump, because that is where he has to put himself, talking about how the Biden administration has not served the average American in 4 years. Trump knows he's up to the task, but I don't know that we'll hear that much substance from him. He knows he will win out when he brings forth a particular style. He knows he can put out as much misinformation as he wants, and it will be a bit hard for anyone, not just the current president, to fight back in real time. I think the economy will be one of the places in which Trump could be quite strong because he can hit back with simple data points. And I think the team around him right now is actually up to that task. For example, fighting back and telling Biden that you lied to the American public, that inflation was not at 9% when I was in office. It was at 9% when you took office. So again, simple messaging like that is where Trump can have strong points and could possibly win, against Biden. But for Trump, it's about message discipline. I don't know that he's up to that task.
Yeah, just to put it in context, we saw that peak of inflation of 9% in June of 2022, when in fact Biden was in office. But Maria, let me ask you, because we got some inflation data this morning, and there was some good news and there was some not so good news. So the good news is that after months of inflation picking up, we saw it actually move in the opposite direction. It started to cool. That is obviously good news, one, for consumers, but perhaps even for Biden. The bad news is that consumers are really pulling back on their spending, and we still may not see rate cuts until the fall. And so my question, Maria, is, as you know, there is not a lot in the president's toolbox to fight inflation. That is the job of the Federal Reserve. So what can he do? I mean, what differently can he do when he is talking, especially to young voters who really feel the pinch of inflation? What does he say differently? How does he reach them?
So I think what he does, Rahel, is that he will underscore the proposals and the policy solutions that he has put forward. You talked about young voters. How many young voters have been strapped with student debt And this president has canceled millions and millions of dollars in student debt, mostly for Black and brown students. As you know, that is transformational for a family who has maybe one or two huge debts because their kids are the first ones to go to college. That is going to be huge for young voters, and they will applaud him for that, and they will support him for that. The other issue is housing, rent, and mortgages. President Biden and his administration just put forward a proposal to help voters who are struggling with rising rents and with difficult mortgages because of what you just mentioned. Because of inflation, the mortgage rates are high. So these proposals will help those voters who are struggling. And again, they will look to that as transformational for them, and they will support President Biden and they will applaud him for that. The other issue for young voters, as you know, Rahel, is the climate. Climate change is a huge issue for these young voters because they know that it is an existential threat for them, their families, and for the future of our country and frankly the world. And President Biden is the only president that up until now has put together proposals and has passed laws that will actually make climate change better. So I think President Biden has a ton to run on for young voters, and once he lays that out or continues to lay that out, they will support him in massive amounts and say no to the dark MAGA extremism that Donald Trump represents.
Rita, last word here. Who will the Nikki Haley supporters, who will they support? Because one thing that I continue to find fascinating is months after she suspended her campaign, she is still polling in or above the 20% range in a lot of primaries, deep red Nebraska, Maryland, Indiana. I mean, one, how do you explain that? And two, who picks up these voters?
You know, even in Ruby Red, West Virginia, which is where I was born and raised, she was able to not so much make a dent, but to register on the Richter scale. And I said that after she dropped out of the race back in February, that there would be jet fumes. And we see those. We see that there's still an appetite of GOP voters who want something else other than Donald Trump. They believe that the chaos that surrounds him is no good. They don't like the words that come out of his mouth. They see that he's self-consumed and really only for himself. But the contrast with Biden is stark. Yes, I do agree. But the real question does become, do those Haley voters become for Biden immediately? I think they're going to give it a lot of time. I don't disagree with my fellow panelist, Maria, here, who is hopeful about younger Americans like me, millennials and Gen Z, giving Biden a more honest shake as we get closer to November. But I think this is an election in which Haley was able to clearly message this past fall on the economy, what her plan would be. She was also able to talk about the geopolitical tension in a different way than Trump. Do these voters then trust Trump to right the ship? I don't think so. You know, we still have massive problems that don't just impact younger Americans. We've got gas prices looking still pretty high. Groceries are more expensive than ever before. Rent is higher than ever. Percentages, mortgages underwater on the rise and reaching new levels is also there. And then forget it all, putting it where when we zoom out and look at it all, the dollar is worth 75% of what it was 4 years ago. These are the simple arguments that Haley was able to make. And I think people liked that. They missed that. If Biden is able to pick up the baton and say, come to me for these reasons, I will address these things. Give me more time. Trust my administration. Trust my leadership to tackle these problems together. Then again, you will see Haley voters go to Biden because they certainly are not going to go to RFK Jr. and anybody else in the race. Heck, it's Trump or Biden. It's a binary choice. Biden becomes the one in which Haley voters could trust more than Trump.
Well, there was certainly a lot there, Rena. I mean, one thing I can say, at least in terms of grocery prices, is today's inflation report confirmed that grocery prices are actually falling, which I'm sure the Biden administration is happy about, and so are American consumers. So, Rena Jha and Maria Cardona, thank you both for being here. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rahel.
It's a busy news day.
Thank
we have a lot of developing and